Because understanding great literature is better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. On the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, we commit to reading, dissecting, and analyzing the great books of the Western canon. You know, those books, from Jane Austen to Shakespeare, and everything else in between, that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school. We do this for our listeners, the owner, the entrepreneur, the manager, or the civic leader who doesn't have the time to read, dissect, analyze, and leverage insights from literature to execute leadership best practices in the confusing and chaotic postmodern world we all now inhabit. Welcome to the rescuing of Western civilization at the intersection of literature and leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast.
My name is Hasan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 136, with our book today, a meditation on business success from a most unlikely author. We've covered a lot of different kinds of books on this podcast, everything from books focused around theology and biblical commentary, all the way to books focused on philosophy and the practicalities of living a meaningful life. We've talked about everything from Jane Austen to Shakespeare, as I said right there in the opening. And of course, we tend to focus on books that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school, most notably War and Peace, or maybe something by another wascally Russian. We've read a lot of difficult books on this podcast. We've read a lot of engaging books on this podcast. And we've even read books that aren't that engaging and aren't that interesting, but we've managed to make something out of them at the end. And Tom Libby, our co-host today, has been on this show for quite a number of these episodes, and has added his own unique flavor and approach to these books, some of which he has read before we've delivered him the script, others of which he perused the Wikipedia article before he showed up here. And he is willing to admit that. But today we have a very special treat for you. Today we have a book by Tom Libby. That's right. Tom Libby is now a published author, and there's no better place for a published author who's also the co-host of this show than, the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. So today, in honor of the publication of The Interpretation of Quotes for Business Success by Tom Libby, I would like to welcome to the podcast our co-host, Tom Libby. And we're going to talk about the thoughts, the ideas, the reasons, and the practical approaches for leaders and the practical things that they can get from Tom Libby's book, The Interpretation of Quotes for Business Success. Welcome to the podcast, Tom. How are you doing today? And Happy New Year.
Oh yeah, for sure. Happy New Year. I totally forgot that January flipped the page over there. To me, the first of the month is the first of the month, no matter what month it is. So sometimes I don't even realize it's totally New Year.
Remember I said Monday. What have you got for me?
Yeah, right.
Every day is Monday.
Every day that ends in Y is Monday, and we've determined this before we hit the record button on here. So, thank you for having me. I actually, when I remember the first time you asked me to come onto this podcast, and I was baffled by how much we were able to extrapolate from some of these classic pieces of literature. And then when you asked me to come on about my book here, I was like, wait, there's no comparison. Like, my book is like, there's no way that this book should ever be in the same breath as some of these books that we've talked about on this podcast. But I certainly do appreciate the opportunity to talk about a book that I just finished up.
Of course. Look, I covered my book on the podcast that I wrote a few years ago now, I think 3 years ago now, 12 Rules for Leaders, the Foundation of Intentional Leadership. And my co-writer there on that book, Bradley Madigan, came on, and we talked about the book. We talked about how we came up with the book and ideas behind the book. And so this is just one of the perks, it is one of the perks, being able to hang around a guy like me. So, I have this platform and I can put anybody on it that I want to. And so there you go. I want to put you on and talk about the book. So, why don't we do this? Typically on this show, we open up with either a long passage or excerpt from the book, or a long quote, or we'll open up with maybe a core idea. So why don't you tell us? Why don't we open up with this? So who was your? Let's start with your favorite quote in the book from your favorite person in the book, and why that was your favorite selection there. Let's open up with that. And if you want to read from the book directly, you can. I think some of us would love to hear the dulcet tones of Tom Libby reading his own words.
So here's a fun thing, right? So here's a fun thing about, I mean, this is a 300 page or 280 page book about quotes. So the thing I find interesting is I had a favorite quote. I really did. I had a favorite quote until I started writing this book, and then all of a sudden the next quote, oh, but I like this one. Oh, but I like this. Oh, but this one's really good. Oh, I like this, but this one impacts more. Like it really did go through that series of like, so I don't know if I could pick a favorite one, but what I will tell you is the one that started it all. I'll explain it this way, because the one that started it all is actually not in the book, and I didn't realize it until I finished the book. So I'll tell you a quick story about it. I had just taken my very first management role in a company. It was my first day of work, and I was driving the 45-minute drive to get there. It was my commute. And I had graduated high school, like I was literally 18 years old. So I had graduated high school a short time before that. And I accepted the position. I was driving. Anyway, I look up at this billboard and I see this quote that I read about 5 minutes into the drive, and the remaining 40 minutes of the drive, not a single thing entered my mind except for that quote. I was constantly trying to think, what is that supposed to mean? Why does that mean? Does it mean something different to me than somebody else? Does it have I literally went through this 40-minute dissertation in my own mind about this quote. And that was at 18 years old. So that was quite a long time ago. I'm not going to tell you how many years, but it was quite a long time ago. And so the quote was, now there's no official attachment to a person because they can't prove one way or another who actually said it, but they think it was Albert Einstein. Okay. And it was the quote was, "Perception is greater than reality."
Okay.
And it was literally on a billboard, and it just said, "Perception is greater than reality." And I forget, there was a little tagline thing underneath. It was some company that put it on there, but that part I never remembered. It was just the quote. And I started thinking that entire drive in, and wouldn't you know that stupid quote impacted my first day at work, because I started taking in information differently. Like as people were saying things to me, I started thinking, well, is that their reality or my reality? Is like, there's a difference between a fact and an interpretation of a fact. And there's a difference between what is real and what is perceived to be real. So I started this whole thing in my brain. And then as I started leveraging that quote in my day-to-day life, I started actually feeling like it was my life's purpose to make people understand that there's always more than one way to look at something. And the fact that you perceive something one way and I perceive something another does not make one of us right and one of us wrong. It really impacted, that one quote impacted my professional career, my being a father, like the way that I interact with, my spouse. Like it really started impacting my whole life. And the simplest version of this that I can give people, and I know I've mentioned this to you more than once because you and I have had similar conversations to this, but the simplest version of this, and if you don't think I'm right, if you don't think that this quote matters, or if you don't think I'm right, here's a very easy way to determine this. Hassan and I go into a room with the one door, no windows, nothing in the room. Just blank room. The two of us go stand in the room. No chairs, no nothing. Just the two of us stand in a room. And a person opens the door and says, "Okay, your hour is up. Why don't you come on back?" I look at Hassan and say, "Holy crap, that was an hour? It felt like it was 5 minutes." And Hassan goes, "5 minutes? I felt like we were in there all day." What is the reality in that scenario is that an hour is an hour. It's 60 minutes, no matter how you slice it or dice it. It's 60 minutes. But how you perceive that hour is way more impactful to you than it is to anybody else. So that one quote literally started this whole thing multiple decades ago. So as I started through my life, and I'm noticing that other people have similar attachments to these quotes, right?
Hmm.
Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you cannot, you're right. Um, there's a plethora of them. And you walk into an office building, you'll see them framed on walls with no way of understanding what that quote means to that company. It's just a quote on a wall to a person walking in, but people who work there, that might be their mantra, right? Like you
Hmm.
might be hired on the precipice of you need to know and understand what that motto or what that quote means to this company because it was said by Steve Jobs or it was said by, whomever. And but to a random person walking in, that quote is just a framed quote on the wall. So
Hmm.
again, so then I started thinking like, what do all these quotes mean to people? And should I have an opinion about this? Can I actually make this mean something to anybody? So that's what prompted the book. I started collecting the thoughts of these quotes and what it means to people and why it's important to people and why do we look up to certain people and why are these quotes actually framed on walls when we mentioned a couple of people before we hit the record button here. People like there are certain people that you can understand, right?
Hmm.
People like Warren Buffett, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, these guys who have built multi-billion dollar organizations. If they have an opinion about business, a lot of people will listen, right? But then you also hear actors and actresses and athletes that come out with these what they think of as these profound comments and people will start quoting them all over the internet because well just because they're famous it has nothing to do with whether they're right or wrong or whether they're good or bad. Well, Michael Jordan's famous. Let's quote Michael Jordan. Now, by the way, just for the peace of mind of the audience here, Michael Jordan is also a very savvy business person. So I'm just going to give him that too. There are a couple of people, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, people
Hmm.
in the basketball world. They are also very savvy business people, and there's a couple others in from the athletic world. But the initial impact of these statements are simply because they're popular or they have like mass media. Take Taylor Swift for example. If Taylor Swift came out and said something that she could put in a quotation box and put it on a mug, you don't think that would sell off the shelves? Now, whether you like her or not is irrelevant. I don't care whether you like Taylor Swift or you like her music or not or anything. The fact is, she has millions and millions and millions of followers. If she put a quote on a coffee mug and decided to sell it, she would make $1 million.
So I think you probably should have put a Taylor Swift quote on the front of your book. I mean, you could have gotten all the
I
Swifties to buy it.
could also,
Damn, that would have been my suggestion. That's where I'm going with this.
yeah.
Okay,
So,
so it's
Manny, if you
interesting.
want an example of this, I can give you
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
but you
yeah,
can
yeah.
ask me a
Give
question or two
us.
first. But if you want me to show you an example of what we're talking about, I can.
Why don't we do this? So, show me an example of what you're talking about. I did a couple and I took a couple of notes. There's something that triggered in my brain, and it's a story that I was telling years ago about quotes on walls. A personal anecdote that happened to me because there's another way that people sort of deal with what they see on a wall. But yeah, no. Why don't we focus on this for just a little bit? So the actual quotes in the book. What was your, as I said before, what was your favorite sort of quote, or what one really is impactful for you beyond the Albert Einstein on the Billboard quote when you were 18?
Uh,
Allegedly, Albert Einstein.
yeah, allegedly, because I don't know why I looked that up years after and I couldn't find a single source that was definitive on who actually said it. But Albert
Yeah.
Einstein is a common associate to it. So I don't know if so that's part of my problem here. And as I started explaining a few minutes ago, I'm not sure I can give you the one or like the one A, B or whatever, because there's so many of them in here. I think there's 140 or 142 actual quotes in here, and they range from everything from, business people, but I segmented the business people into modern business people like the Jeff Bezoses and the Richard Bransons of the world versus the let's just call them the OGs of the entrepreneurial world, like
Hmm.
the Henry Fords and the Harvey Firestones of the world. And I was amazed at some of the quotes that came out of the old leadership of businesses that actually still apply today, if you really think about it. Some of those, like Hassan and I use a phrase so often that I think it's now just embedded in our vernacular, which is the more things change, the more things stay the same, right? So when you look at a
Hmm.
quote from Henry Ford in 1910 or 12 or something like that, and you read it and you go, well, shoot, I can still use that today. Like that
Right.
actually still applies or whatever, right? So I segmented the book into things like that, right? So you have quotes from business leaders from today, business leaders from yesterday. I have athletes and historical figures. There's entertainment, military leaders, motivational speakers. Of course, how could you do a book about quotes and not include motivational speakers? And then there's, some authors in there. So there's about nine different categories of things. So I think if I segmented them out, I would have probably one or two favorites in each one of those segments. But
Hmm.
I'll for the sake of your question and for the podcast, I will tell you one that from the athletic perspective, and the reason I said Michael Jordan earlier, there was a quote by Michael Jordan. This was it had to have been as he started his entrepreneurial phase. This was not while he was playing basketball, although he was, a six-time NBA champion. I'm just letting everybody know that my vote for the greatest of all time is Michael Jordan, not anybody else, not to be named LeBron. Anyway, so uh,
Not to put you off track, but I did see somebody tweeted the other day, or X or whatever it's called now, uh, that he personally thought that Djokovic and Steph Curry should be ranked ahead of Kobe Bryant in the list of greatest basketball players of all time. And I just thought,
wait, Michael Jordan did or
no, no,
LeBron
no,
did?
no, 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 no. Some random dude on Twitter. Like
Some random.
this is not, no, Michael Jordan. No, please. No, no. Some random dude on Twitter. I think some former basketball player, Chandler something.
Oh yeah.
And I just shook my head because people are just saying things for attention now. They're just saying things to get attention. It's
Yeah.
just you're just saying things so that people will look at you and yell. And I'm just not going to participate in that because that's just stupid. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, stupidest piece of analysis I've ever heard. And I want to go on record as saying there's only two greatest guards ever in the history of the NBA. There was Michael Jordan, and then there was Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant's your backup. That's it. That's they're the two greatest two guards in the history of the NBA.
And if you want a third off the bench, I would probably say oh, what the hell was his name?
Bill
Uh,
Russell.
no, Bill Russell wasn't a guard. Wasn't he a big guy? Wasn't he a big? I thought Bill Russell was a
Oh,
big.
no, he was a
So
big guy. No,
I
sorry.
was thinking, but I was thinking on the Celtics of that era though. Havlicek, sorry.
Oh, Havlicek. Okay, yeah,
So I mean,
yeah.
if you want to take somebody off the bench, maybe him. But you're right. Of those three, and Havlicek is not in the conversation of the best. I'm just talking about off the bench, like
Off the
somebody.
bench.
If you
Yeah,
need to rest Jordan and Kobe, he's probably the guy I'm taking as my third. You know what I mean?
yeah,
But
yeah.
that's about it. But you're right. You're right. I would never argue that ever. Anyway, all right.
Anyway,
So
sorry,
back.
Michael Jordan's quote. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Michael Jordan, the biggest adventure you can take is to live the life of your dreams. So I took that quote and I wrote, so my excerpt from the book here is, I often joke with people saying entrepreneurs are the only people I know who work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40. It's a humorous take, but there's a lot of truth in it. Starting and running your own business is an adventure that demands hard work, long hours, and a lot of dedication. If you've got dreams of owning your own business, I say go for it. Just be ready to truly put in the effort. The rewards can be incredible, but the journey isn't for the faint of heart. Owning a business isn't just a job, it's a lifestyle. The hours are long, the challenges are constant, and the decisions are only yours to make. But that's also what makes it so rewarding. You get to chase your dreams, create something from scratch, and enjoy the adventure of building something that's truly your own. However, best advice, sorry, the best advice is don't try to do it alone if you can avoid it. Having partners or support system can make all the difference. I have several partners, and honestly, I don't know what I'd do without them. Being able to share the workload, bounce ideas off of each other, and combine our expertise is invaluable. Running a business can be overwhelming at times, and having people to share the burden with not only makes it manageable, but also allows for better decision making and greater growth. Entrepreneurship is a rewarding journey, but it's a lot more enjoyable and sustainable when you've got the right people by your side. So, if you're dreaming of starting your own business, dive in head first, but remember to surround yourself with partners, mentors, or a strong network to help you along the way. You'll be better off. So, again, if you were just walking into an office and you saw a company that had this on the wall, the biggest adventure you can take is to live the life of your dreams. How are you making that impactful as you walk in that first day at work, right? Like, is the company, is this something up for decoration, or is it something that the company lives by and they want you to like be they're going to try to help you be a better employee and they be better employers? How does that impact you as you walk in the door? I found it, and then I just basically turned it into, if this is your life dream, then maybe your life dream is to own your own company. But if it is, make sure you think about this. It's not always a dream. And Hasan and I both have been on the beginning stages of these startup companies. There can be nightmares involved. Just remember, nightmares are dreams too. So you got to make sure that you're ready for them, right? And be make sure. So that's the style in the book. If you happen to be reading this book, that is some of the stuff that I talk about in the book, is taking some of these quotes and kind of leaning into them, right? And making sure that you interpret them and your perceived value of this quote is impacting you. And if you're going to use this quote, then make sure you're using it, to your heart's feltness, not just some random. It shouldn't just be a random quote on your wall, I guess, is the point. Put some thought into which quotes matter to you.
Well, and it's interesting because this ties into what you're saying. This ties into my point that I was going to make earlier before you read that quote from Michael Jordan and your interpretation of it. So I worked with a client that is, I won't say the name of them, but they are now no longer in business. They went bankrupt. Found that out, gosh, probably about 3 or 4 years ago. But early in my corporate training career, I worked with this now bankrupt client, and every time I would walk into their physical location to set up a training, I would see quotes on the wall, multiple quotes actually, from Thomas Edison, from the aforementioned Albert Einstein, Albert Schweitzer, just lining, the quote wall that you sometimes walk past inside of organizations, right?
For sure, yeah.
And I would ask the security guard, who was always escorting me, because it was always like going to Fort Knox. I couldn't be trusted walking through there because I was going to somehow steal some proprietary secret or something. And it was a shipping and logistics company. Really, if I wanted to start a shipping and logistics company, I wouldn't have to steal your stuff. I could probably figure it out on my own. That's always been my attitude. And so I'm walking through with the security guard. And one time I asked the security guard on my way to deliver this training at this place, I asked the security guard, so do you ever read these quotes on the wall? Like, do you ever read them? Does this mean anything to you? And he looks at me and he goes, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't see anything on the wall anymore. And I thought, in the context of sort of what I was doing with this organization and the training that I was delivering, it kind of made sense, because the training that I was delivering was on accountability, interestingly enough, and a lack of accountability inside of the organization, inside of the culture. And that kind of went along with everything that the security guard was saying. But at a deeper level, and this is the level that I think you're getting to with these quotes and with your thoughts on them, we slap these words around, or we frame these words as iconic that come from people. And what we don't realize is that at a certain point, these iconic words are devoid of, or are so far away from their original meaning, that we have to imbue them with new meaning. And if we don't consistently and repeatedly imbue these words with meaning, they begin to be stale, right? They begin to fall on deaf ears. They become aphorisms or even, weirdly enough, caricatures of what they were originally meant to be. And of course, if we don't refresh or renew these words, sometimes, you know, they fall off, right? They fall off in our culture, they fall off in our society. We talk about this with great books, you know. um you know Maybe probably about 3 or 4 generations ago, a lot of people would know where a quote from a Shakespeare play came from. They would have known that. They would have been classically educated, or at least moderately classically educated in the public school system, or they would have at least had Shakespeare force fed to them. Now, most people know about Shakespeare, if they know about Shakespeare at all, from a movie that starred Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Back in the day. Yeah. And or Gwyneth Paltrow. I'm sorry, it wasn't Leonardo DiCaprio, it was Gwyneth Paltrow. But Leo did do Shakespeare as well. And I would say that most modern people, postmodern people between 18 and 34 in that age range, probably don't know Shakespeare at all. And I saw a quote framed the other day on a social media platform that I shall not name, in reference to the inauguration of our now current president. And the quote was taken out of context from the Shakespeare play. And it was interesting enough, it's a play that we actually read on this podcast. So it's taken out of context. And it's this out of context quote that's just framed on the internet, which is, of course, social media is, of course, our new wall of text, right, in a building. And I know people are doom scrolling past that. They're tying it to current events. They're going, yes, that check marks a box in my head for how I feel about this particular moment. And then they're moving on. And they're doing that analysis inside of 10 milliseconds and moving on to the next doom scroll thing. And so we have all these quotes and all these words and all these aphorisms, but they're disconnected, right, and decontextualized. And so what I think your book does, even in the title, is it contextualizes or recontextualizes these quotes in a way that allows us to sort of anchor ourselves and anchor the meaning of them to something, which is critical for, to your point in the title, even, and in what you were just saying, business success. One other thing that I noted when I was looking through the book and reading it and looking at the quotes and figuring out sort of how to talk about it today, unless I'm mistaken, and I missed it, and I did see you had doubles in some places, like you quoted Jeff Bezos a couple of times. You quoted Tony Robbins a couple of times. You had a couple of quotes from, to your point, Henry Ford, Harvey Firestone. You know, you went back to the well a couple of times there on a couple of folks, which is fine. I noted that you did not have any, unless I missed them, with the exception of one person who I would not classify in this area. You did not have any actors.
No, I did.
You did? Okay, so I missed it. Okay, so I did miss it. Okay, because that was, I thought when you were talking about how you had set it up, I was like, okay, yeah, Jordan, Tony Robbins, military guys.
Let's see.
But
I Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. There we go.
Audrey Hepburn, Lucille Ball, Jonathan Winters, Walt Disney. Yeah, there's a few of them in here.
Well, Walt Disney, I wouldn't classify. Walt Disney was an entrepreneur. I wouldn't classify him as an actor. Lucille Ball was
true. That's true. You know what I did is I categorized them as the entertainment business.
Okay,
so,
all right.
So that's probably, yeah.
That's probably, yeah. Jonathan Winters, I believe he had an entrepreneurial bent, if I'm not mistaken. Lucille Ball, most people don't know this. Desilu Productions, she owned, was hers, right?
Yeah.
And I believe they produced Gunsmoke, if I remember correctly. Desilu Productions produced that. But I know for sure, they published the original, not published, but they were the ones that were the production company, or they funded and supported a young creative named Gene Roddenberry, who had an idea for a show set in space.
If it wasn't for Lucille Ball, that show would have never existed. I forgot about that.
Called Star Trek.
How is it every single conversation we have, Hassan, eventually turns into film? I don't understand how that happens, but it does. Every single conversation we have, on or off the air, so to speak.
It's because film is in the blood. It is the life. It's part of the life.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to a little bit about the quotes in the book, why you picked the quotes you picked, or at least why you picked the structure that you picked. I do have a question about this. So, um, the people that you picked, right? We talked a little bit about those folks, right? You have divided up into different sort of areas, right? Um, One person that jumped out to me, and I want you to talk a little bit about him because we'd covered his book, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do, on the podcast way back in the first season, with my MMA instructor and former Marine. Yeah, former Marine. So such thing as an ex-Marine till you're dead. What I hear from the Marines anyway. um,
I have a few of those in my family. It's weird, but go ahead.
well, it's the Marine Corps. I mean, there you go. But Josh Poland, we covered on the podcast with him this book. But talk a little bit about Bruce Lee, because you have a particular fascination with Bruce Lee.
I do. And it's so for my fascination started when I was very, very, very young. And I don't, for those of you who have not guessed my age, you probably will at this point, because if you remember, Saturday afternoons was all about Kung Fu theater and creature double feature. Like that that was my entire Saturday, was waking up at 5 a.m. to watch, to make sure I watched certain cartoons that were on in the morning. I'd get lunch, come back in time for, Kung Fu Theater and Creature Double Feature. I remember the first time I ever watched a Bruce Lee movie and thinking to myself, I mean, this guy was superhuman. And I was thinking about we go back, we're starting with the film again. I started thinking about special effects that they used in movies and TV shows, and thinking there's no way this guy can do what he was doing on that screen. That has to be some sort of special effect. And then as I started learning more about him, realizing that, so again, for those of you who don't know, Bruce Lee's punch was so fast they could not film it in slow motion enough for you to see it. Think about what I just said there. They filmed it in slow motion and you still couldn't see it. That's how fast he was. And again, to me, as a kid, I was thinking that's inhuman. There's no way that's possible. Again, so as I started, then I decided, I was like, well, if he could do it, so can I, which, haha, no. But anyway, I had that mentality. So I was like, I'm gonna go take martial arts, and I'm gonna go, find a martial arts person that can teach me his way. I had no interest in any other form of martial arts. I had no interest in jujitsu or taekwondo or aikido or any of it. I had no interest in any of them. So I had to go. It took me, I don't it took me forever to find the person that could teach me this, because in my neighborhoods it was taekwondo everywhere. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
like you or karate. There was a
Yeah.
couple of ones that just said karate on it, but there was not the variety that we see today. Like if you go and Google's in your neighborhood, you could probably find just about every form of martial arts. And I say just about because I'm sure there are some that I'm not thinking of that we don't have here in the US. But I would imagine dozens upon dozens of different styles, forms, techniques that you can find online. When we
Mm-hmm.
were kids, that didn't happen. You basically had judo because it was in the Olympics. You had
Mm-hmm.
taekwondo because it was in the Olympics. And that was like, that's what they were training for. They were training people to be the next generation of, Olympic champion here in the US. Anyway, as I found the right Sifu, it was it was really interesting to me that I didn't learn a single kick, punch, stance. There was nothing that they didn't teach me anything until I deeply understood his philosophy. It was more like a classroom setting for me in the first, like, it was months. I don't remember the exact time frame. I was very young. Well, not very young. I was probably like 9, but that's not very young. I should have memories at 9, but I'm just saying. I don't remember if it was 3 months or 6 months or 7 months, whatever. I just remember it was months that I literally sat there in the dojo, and I didn't get to learn. I felt like I didn't learn anything. But
Mm-hmm.
the more they just browbeat you into the fact that you need to understand who he was as a person, what got him there, his philosophies, how he thinks, his movements aren't going to make sense to you until you really understand him as a person. So
Right.
now, fast forward to today, when I see these movies made about his life and stuff like that, I'm like, that's not exactly, yeah. And then you see interviews with his actual students talking about the movies, and I go, yeah, that's what I thought too. Like,
Yeah.
and I was never his student, but I felt so connected to him because the person that I learned from was so adamant that it was not about kicks and punches. It was about philosophy, and it was about how you treated people. It was your interaction. It was your personal interaction with everything. Not just how you punch a bag, or how you get into a fight and protect yourself, or whatever you think martial arts is. It He made it feel like that martial arts was about your internal being, and how your internal being makes sense of the world, and how the world interacts with you, and how you impact it both, how it gets impacted both ways, right? So
Yep.
the funny thing is, I probably could have filled this book with Bruce Lee quotes, and I didn't on purpose, because I knew I would just geek out over it and not really pay attention to anybody else. So I promised myself I was only going to put one. I was only going to put one in it, and I tried to make it the most business like I could think of, because some of the quotes that he talks about, and if you listen to some of his philosophies, they are definitely more self-serving
Mhm.
in the philosophical part of it. It's like it's about internalizing things, and how you do or don't allow outside forces to impact your inside feelings. Like, there's a lot of like that interaction. So there was very few that I could look at and go, oh, I can directly translate this into business, right? Like, there
Mhm.
was, because it was more about interpersonal. So there was one I found, and I promised myself that I was only going to use one. But
Yeah.
yes,
Well, why don't you go ahead
Bruce
and
Lee.
why don't you go ahead and share that one with us? Why don't you go ahead
So
and
Bruce Lee was a very, very impactful person to me as at a very young level. And by the way, I still say to this day that if he never died in 1974 or 73, sorry, that this world, I think this world would have been a different place. I really, honestly, truly believe this world would have been a different place had he lived.
yeah.
But we'll never know.
Yeah.
There's a good start for a movie there, Hasan. The Butterfly Effect. You remember that movie, The Butterfly Effect? I
Oh
think we
yeah.
should go back and save Bruce Lee's life and just see how the world changes as we go.
Just-
Anyway, all right. So the quote from Bruce Lee was, "The successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus." Now, do you want to hear my thoughts on this, or do you just want to talk about the quote?
oh, absolutely. I want to hear your thoughts on this, and
Okay.
then we can talk about the quote.
So, as I just mentioned here, the book reads, first, I need to admit something here. I'm a huge Bruce Lee fan. I have seen every movie he's made, every TV show he was in, and most everything that was made to tell his story. I even took Jeet Kune Do as a kid. Oh, and something I didn't put in here is, I bought a first edition copy of that book, by the way, and read that about 100 times.
Okay.
The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. I
The
have the
Dodgy
book.
Show.
I have the book behind me in the bookcase. Anyway, back to the book. That said, this is still sound advice from a business perspective. I have been in sales and marketing consultant for well over a decade, and one of the most common pieces of advice I give to companies is to focus on their ideal client profile. Focus on the most perfect customers with laser-like determination and understanding. If you can do that, marketing to them is easier. Your ideal client profile is most likely your best weapon. It's like a martial artist choosing between a sword or a bow staff. If you're truly better with one over the other, it'll give you the best chance of winning. If you focus on what your company does best and for the correct target market, you'll be successful. You should minimize the distractions and pay close attention to what helps you move the needle forward. So again, from a business perspective, I looked at that, you know, success, you can be an average person, you can be an average company, you can be a mediocre, middle of the road, but if you define success by customer acquisition, revenue, any of those other things, and you have laser-like focus on the people that you should be doing business with, you can overcome a lot. You can overcome a lot in your business by having that laser focus. So that was my thought on the quote.
One of the things that Bruce Lee really advocated for. And I agree. If he hadn't died in 74, I think the entire history of martial arts and entertainment in America would be totally different. We probably wouldn't have had the McDojo phenomenon that we had in the 1980s and the 1990s, where literally every person with an idea of what a martial art could be, opened up shop and watered down karate and watered down taekwondo. And I've said on this podcast before, I'm a person with a background in taekwondo. I'm currently doing currently on a long grind in jiu-jitsu. I'm grinding my way towards a black belt in jiu-jitsu. My old behind. And all of that would have probably been different. But Bruce Lee because of the kind of shadow that Bruce Lee cast upon just the world of martial arts and combat sports and combat philosophy, not only in the East but in the West, and particularly through his Hollywood efforts. So I agree with you. Things would have been different. Quite different.
And don't get me wrong, I still think he had a positive impact on some of that stuff. I mean, if you think about it, some of the martial artists that we have today and we consider action stars, a lot of them actually have real experience. I mean, Jet Li is a 3-time wushu champion. I mean, that guy,
right.
I would not want to meet Jet Li in a dark alley when he's mad at me. Like, you know what I mean? I'm sorry, but that guy is incredible. Same thing with a couple others. Like, I think people don't realize that there is some cinematography that goes on, and I get that, but there is some sense of authenticity when you talk about some of these guys. Like again, Donnie, what is it? Donnie Yen. Yeah, Donnie Yen's very good. Like Jason Statham, very good. Like people don't realize that guy comes across as a typical action star, like the Sylvester Stallones and the Arnold Schwarzeneggers of the world, not realizing this guy can fight, man. Like this guy is real. Like he's legit. Same thing.
Well, like, or Wesley Snipes, or Wesley Snipes. Yeah.
You know who surprised me in this world, though? Honest to God, I never would have thought it. And you, I don't know if you know. You've got to know this. Of all people, you know this. Dolph Lundgren.
Oh yeah.
Most people don't realize two things about Dolph Lundgren. Number one, the guy is freaking brilliant. He has advanced degrees. Like this guy is not dumb. Number one. Number two, he was actually a fighter. Like this guy fought for a living.
Yeah, he's more than just a pretty face.
Yeah.
And like, what was it, Rocky IV?
Rocky IV. Yeah. No, Rocky IV. Sorry, Rocky III was the fight back to Clubber Lang. Yeah. So it was
yeah.
The Russian.
Yeah, the Russian. Yeah.
Poor Carl Weathers. Tragic.
Anyway. I loved Carl Weathers. So I think Bruce Lee would have had a huge impact. Probably more so than, well, Karate Kid would have been a totally different phenomenon, because that actually did set up a whole lot of shenanigans and nonsense that happened later on through no fault of the film's own. Like the film was just trying to be an entertaining film, tell a story, and there's a whole bunch of domino effects that happened after that.
Yeah. Well, fun fact: Pat Morita had no idea what martial arts was until he did that movie.
Yeah.
So there's that.
So there's that.
Then you look at the Karate Kid version with Jackie Chan and Jalen Smith.
Right.
Jaden Smith. I was thinking Jalen Daniels of the Washington Redskins. Sorry. Football's still on my brain too. Anyway, Jaden, with Smith and Jackie Chan, I think that's more realistic as to what we would have seen in the first run if Bruce Lee was still alive. Right? Like, whether yes, no, whatever, I don't know, but we could debate it all.
Hello. So I'm going to do some shilling here, and hopefully this will be a pause in our riveting conversation for you. I have an offer for you. My most recent book is 12 Rules for Leaders, The Foundation of Intentional Leadership. It's available in paperback, hardcover, or as an ebook on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and any other place you order books. Now, in this book, I address the 12 leadership areas that I have found leaders need to be the most intentional in to be the type of leader followers actually want to follow. From establishing a foundation of leading teams through managing conflict effectively, all the way through leading teams through change, knowing what to do and why to do it can help readers, like the ones listening to this show, become better leaders. Look, reading this book and living it is like getting coaching from me directly without having to pay my full coaching rate. Head on over to leadershiptoolbox.us. That's leadershiptoolbox.us, and scroll down the homepage and click on the Buy Now button to purchase in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle format on Amazon 12 Rules for Leaders, the foundation for intentional leadership. And that's it for me. Now back to the show.
Well, and that would have been and if Bruce Lee had lived, again, this is a counterfactual conversation here, sort of thought here, but Jackie Chan probably would not have been as big a star as he was. He probably would have peaked a little bit earlier and then declined a little bit quicker. Speaking to the point about Jet Li, I don't know that Jet Li gets out of China. I don't know, because Bruce Lee's just, that's a stranglehold. I mean, the older you get, the more of a stranglehold you have on things. And yeah, Jet Li would have still been Jet Li, but who would have known it, right? Or maybe Bruce Lee would have gone in the opposite direction, and I kind of tend to think he would have gone more in this direction, where he would have plucked out talent out of the East and brought it to Hollywood and said, I'm going to put my thumbprint on you, and you're going to come over with me.
Knowing what I know about his life, I think the latter there would have absolutely have been his path. He was always looking for good talent to put in his movies with him. And then think about it. Jackie Chan was in one of his first movies.
Yep.
One of Jackie Chan's first movies was with Bruce Lee. So he talks about him in one interview. I found an interview with Jackie Chan quite a long time ago, probably 15 or 20 years ago or something like that. But he talks about that experience with him. And so I think, to your point, I think the latter. I think Bruce Lee would have done more for the movie impact of in the showcasing of what martial arts. But I think I would have appreciated it more if he brought his philosophies into it, like as he started getting a little bit older, into his early 30s, because I think he died at 32, if I remember correctly. At 32, as he started getting a little bit older in his late 20s and early 30s, the philosophy was more important than the actual physical, right? So it was taking care of your physical body was important, and he never downplays that. Never downplays taking care of your physical body. But as he started getting more and more into the philosophies of it, I think we would have seen more of that in the movies. Or at least I would have liked to. I would have thought it was really important.
Well, the big question, which always the big counterfactual, which again, we can never know, right? This is all speculation. But for me, the big counterfactual beyond the movies or him plucking out talent or even his interactions with Hollywood, Pache Quentin Tarantino, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I think Bruce Lee's biggest impact or biggest sort of moment, if he had lived, would have been his interaction with UFC, and sort of how, and this is one of those untold stories, but similar to the untold story of how we have switched, and I've said this a couple of times on the podcast, but how we've switched from, in the United States of America, we switched in the 1960s. As television became more popular, we switched from being a baseball culture to being a football culture. And the baseball culture, baseball is a game of individuals played as a team, whereas football culture is all team all the time. And if the cornerback screws up, we don't win the game. That's a psychological switch in leadership. It's a psychological switch in judgment. It's a psychological switch in the direction of competency and merit. A whole bunch of things go along with that, and that's reflected. We always talk about film on this podcast, to your point, but that's reflected in the types of entertainment that people take advantage of. And sports, for better or worse, is a form of entertainment for many people in this country. And so the switch from more of a baseball mentality to more of a football mentality is one of those unsung, unstated unanalyzed and unexamined sort of transitions in America. But I think the other unexamined transition, and this one strikes me even more as a person who's involved in the martial arts, is our switch from a boxing culture to a UFC culture. And look, I'm not taking anything away from UFC folks. They're athletes. I would never not say that they are athletes. I would never not say that what they are doing is not hard or difficult, or that I could get in the ring and do it. I would never say any of that. Maybe when I was 20, I might have thought that. I have a completely different perspective 25 years later. Um, but I think the move from boxing as quote unquote the sweet science, and I believe you have a Muhammad Ali quote in there in your book too, from boxing as a sweet science to the UFC as, and let's be blunt about what the UFC is. I mean, let's be blunt and direct. It is Greek cage fighting, and the only thing we're missing is all those guys and women. Let's be direct about this, being oiled up and naked and just like doing the deed right on TV. We have transitioned right from something that was ruled by a sense of aristocratic elitism at the highest levels, even. And Ali broke a lot of that, but up until that point, there was still some of that hanging around. And even after Ali, there was some of that hanging around. The person who fully broke all that was Mike Tyson. But we moved from that in a space of boxing psychologically in this country to a space of, okay, we're all just going to get oiled up and we're all just going to like wrestle on the ground and punch each other in the face. And I know I'm minimizing it, but I mean, this is where we're at.
I call it the train wreck effect, right? Like, you know how you ever hear people talk about, like, you can't drive by a train wreck without slowing down and looking, like you have to watch, like you,
right. To
me, even people who don't like UFC will watch a fight or two if it's hyped up enough, because like a train wreck, you have to because you have to see what happens. You have to see what's next, what kind of bloodiness, what kind of arm is going to get broken, what kind of, like, it's like the violence is addictive almost, right? And it's like we can watch the violence and not be violent because we're allowing our violent what's the word I'm thinking of?
Tendencies, instincts,
not tendencies, curiosities, our violent curiosities. Because I don't think everyone has a violent tendency, but I think we have violent curiosities, which is why some people love watching wildlife films that the lion catches the zebra, and some people like watching the just the thrill of the hunt and the zebra gets away and they get all exhilarated, right? So, and I'm kind of weird because I like both. I have no qualms about saying, but to your point though, here's the weird part. I find myself leaning more toward boxing now because of some of that, what you're talking about, because it really is just violent to be violent. There's not that there's no skill to it. I'm not, again, to your point, I'm not suggesting these guys are not athletes and they're not skillful, but the skill set is so different and the strategies are so different because the strategies are more about pain infliction and less about tactical warfare, so to speak, whereas boxing is more about tactical warfare and mitigating your risk at the point of attack where you can end the fight, right? Like, so like when you see that glaze in the eye, can you get a knockout punch in there? You know, and there are some people that are dangerous even being dazed, and you go closer, you get dinged anyway, and you're both, anyway. But boxing, but here's the funny part I find about the two sports. So far, and I say so far because I'm sure it'll eventually happen, so far, every UFC fighter that has gotten into a boxing ring has lost.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So to people who always have this debate on which sport is more difficult, more whatever terminology you're going to use, who's the better athlete, I don't know, whatever. Until a UFC fighter can step into the ring and box a 12-round championship boxing bout and win, y'all just need to stop. All right, I'm just saying, and this is coming from somebody who's a martial artist too, right? You, Hassan, listen, I have no delusions of thinking that I'm getting into any of those rings. And by the way, even when I was 20, my sensei would have kicked my rear end if I thought I'm going to go fight somebody on purpose. I would have been dead. He would have killed me. But anyway, So even at 20, I would have never thought to get in that ring. I would have never ever thought it. So I'm not suggesting that I'm better than them by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that if you look at the two sets of athletes and you put them in the same ring together. Now, all the UFC guys always say, "We'll take a boxer and put him, we'll kill them in the octagon." Yeah, well, no kidding, because boxers don't train in ground and pound, and they're not going to learn that in 3 months before a fight. Whereas
Right.
UFC fighters work on boxing skills all the time.
Yeah.
And yet, when given the opportunity to spend 6 months to actually train in it, they still can't get up to speed with somebody who's been doing it most of their life, right? Like that's,
Well, and at a practical level, and
and
then
we
we
need to
could
get off this
and we
soon.
could we could switch off from boxing talk here in just a second. I think we've
Bruce Lee
irritated.
thing definitely derailed us. I told you this
Yeah,
could
yeah,
happen, Hassan. I told
yeah.
you that the Bruce Lee thing would derail us.
We've abandoned half our audience. It's fine. No, I think that and I've noticed this at a practical level, and I'm no Joe Rogan level. I'm not a Joe Rogan analysis guy, so please, if you're going to come for me, fine, whatever. Correct my analysis. But in looking at the striking capabilities of a UFC fighter, your average UFC fighter, and by the way, I think Bruce Lee would have been very impactful in the same way the Gracies were impactful on the
Yes.
UFC, 1 through maybe 5, maybe even 1 through 10. But I think after UFC 10, there's a marked, to your point, turn towards brutality and ground and pound, right? There's a marked turn in that direction because if it bleeds, it leads, and you've got to get ticket sales up. And Royce Gracie or Horion Gracie, I'm sorry, Helion Gracie, or any of the Gracie brothers. And it would have been interesting, by the way, the Gracie brothers versus Bruce Lee. That would have been interesting because I think number one, Bruce Lee would have learned jiu-jitsu. Number two, he wouldn't have had any patience for the Gracies, like zero patience. But they wouldn't have they would have had any patience for him either.
Yeah.
And I think that generational gap between the two of them would have been exposed in any UFC kind of engagement beyond just age. It was just been a gap in philosophy. Um, and who would have won that? Who would have come out on top? Obviously, it's a counterfactual. Who can say? Now, last point, pounding, right? On the technique, on the tactic. Most UFC fighters, hell, and this is a knock on most jiu-jitsu fighters, do not know how to strike.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, to your point, for all of their training in striking, ground game, kicking, where the emphasis is placed most is on kicking, then ground game, and maybe then punching. But the punches pound for pound, like we just know this, the punches pound for pound are not nearly as impactful or nearly as powerful as those of a professional boxer. So look, we can to your point, we could do a whole, just like with film, we could do a whole podcast episode on this, the leadership lessons from the UFC.
Yeah. leadership, leadership lessons from Fight Club. That's what we should call it.
There you go. That's right. Hey, that might actually be a good episode. We might actually do Fight Club. I do like that book, and I do like the movie.
We would be violating the first rule, though.
That's true. That's true. So we're done now, and you have a good day. Shortest podcast we've ever done. Okay, so surprises, right? Were there any surprises for you when you wrote this book? Were you surprised by either any people that you picked, any quotes that you picked? Were you surprised by any analysis that you gave, or that you developed? Like, what were some surprises for you or maybe even putting the book together? Because you often don't talk about how books get put together. I talked a little bit about it when I self-published my book, 12 Rules for Leaders. But were there even any surprises that you discovered in putting together the book, or in the people, or your analysis, or any of that?
I think the easiest one to answer of all of that would be the people that I selected, right? So when I first started, again, this came about, this has been 10 years in the making, right? So I started thinking about the first time I ever thought about doing this, it was originally thought of as doing it as social media posts when we were really starting to really move on the idea or the concept of social selling and putting products and services on social media which was plus or minus, it was about 10 years ago. I know people can argue it was a little bit longer than that, whatever, it doesn't matter. But anyway, so I started coming up with I was like, let me come up with a couple of really good business quotes. And I went to the Richard Bransons of the world and the Jeff Bezos. Tony Robbins was probably one of the first people that I looked up when I started thinking about doing this. But this all started really as social media posts, and how I selected the people just became, I just be honest, it started to become random. Like I really, it was like, wait, like, because again, so when you think of these quotes, the first thought or the first idea or concept, like you think of what can we use to motivate our people? Can we think of a motivational quote? We always use motivational quotes. What I say. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, so Tony Robbins and a couple others that are in the motivational world, the Brian Tracy's of the world and Zig Ziglar and whoever, right? But there's only so many of them that you get really good quotes from before it starts getting to be you're now basically peddling Tony Robbins everywhere, right? Like you just
Right.
you start sounding like you're a Tony Robbins reseller. So then I was like, who else do we take motivation from? We probably get motivation from athletes. Let me look up and see if any athletes have any like famous quotes. So I just said, famous quotes from athletes in the Google search, and it popped up a couple. And then I was like, interesting. Like then I started Google like motivational quotes from business leaders or whatever. And that's honestly, I just started thinking, where do we get our motivation from, and where does that how do we find these people? It opened up the doors to me, quite honestly, and I was thinking about like some of the quotes that are in the book, by the way, are like if you look up the section about historical figures,
Hmm.
I when you talk about like favorites, right? So I actually do have one of my favorites in the historical figure part, and then I go down these rabbit holes where I'll see a quote from somebody and I'll be like, oh, where did that quote come from? How did that guy
Hmm.
learn that? Where did that or
Hmm.
girl, sorry, because there are plenty of women in the book. But where did that person learn that? How did that person like whatever? So one of the historical figures that I came, George Washington Carver, that guy blew my mind when I read about him. Like, I don't
Hmm.
know if there's a biography written about him, but if there is, you should probably cover it on this podcast at some point. Because the more and more I read about this guy, the more impressed I was with him as a human being. It is in it was so
I'm looking up
I don't
George Washington Carver on Amazon right now. Go ahead.
you're looking at to see if there's a book about him.
Let's see if
Good.
there's a book about him. Yeah.
'Cause so he was born in 1864 and he lived until 1943. Think of the stuff that man had seen in his lifetime. Like just that time frame, and the fact that he was able to go to college, get advanced degrees, he actually started a college program at I believe it was at Tuskegee University or something like that about agriculture, and the guy was amazing. He was brilliant. And like and then so his quote in the book, I won't read the whole thing if you don't want me to, but his quote in the book
Oh,
was
God.
99% of all failures come from people who have a habit of making excuses. How is that not appropriate today? Like, like I read that and I was like, we could write a book about that quote. I mean, seriously, we could write a book about that quote. And even like I even started out in the book on my thoughts about the quote. I wrote, first things first, what an amazing guy. Like I'd suggest if you ever have a chance to read his biography to do so, I'm certain you'll be impressed by his story too. One of the most resilient his story is one of resilience, the power of perspective, and a testament to the strength of his own nature. Like this guy was a force and just went under the radar from most people most of his life. But if you actually see his accomplishments, what they meant to the agricultural world today, that they still actually use his philosophies and his theories, it's incredible how impactful this guy was that nobody even really knows about. Like it's
Yeah, everybody's like the peanut guy. What are you talking about?
exactly. People are like, oh wait, George Washington Carver was he a real guy? Like did you know was I somebody asked me when I brought him up one time, somebody asked me, I was like, oh, was that the guy that 12 Years a Slave was made out of like made for? No, this guy
No.
wasn't even alive at that point. Like he wasn't like, but he was born in 1864, which means there was a possibility that he
Mhm.
technically was born a slave, probably didn't live his life as a slave very, obviously,
Mhm.
because 1864 was when it was abolished. But
Right.
but there was a very high probability that he was born into slavery and then released as a young child, as a toddler
Mhm.
even. But
Mhm.
but if you think about born into slavery and then in 1943 he saw World War II, like that to me is just blows my mind. Like that time frame alone just boggles my mind. But then to think about all the stuff that he accomplished and the things that he did, it was incredible.
Well, he was part of that generation that also included folks like W.E.B. Du Bois,
Yeah.
who we covered on this podcast, Booker T. Washington, whose book Up from Slavery
Yep.
we covered. Those men and women that came directly out of that post-slavery Reconstruction era, quite frankly, their attitude was this: from the poorest person to the W.E.B. Du Bois types who had never been in slavery, who were up in the Northeast and were historically freedmen. Their attitude to a person was, "Oh, we're free. Let's just go grab as much as we possibly can, as fast as we can possibly grab it before." Huh, before it's found out that it's all a joke or something like that or whatever, or before we're going back, right? Because it could be taken away from us. And so they just worked ruthlessly and pursued excellence ruthlessly, um in spite of, to the point of the quote, in spite or not in spite of, and looked at everything. They pursued ruthlessly excellence and looked at anything outside of that as mere excuse making. Like Booker T. Washington, he taught himself how to read.
Yeah, right.
He was like, okay, I'm just going to go teach myself how to read. Like, why is that a problem? And this is a guy who had like literally zero, well, not literally, but almost zero schooling from the age of 5 to something like 12 or 13. So he's starting from scratch at 13. And he's just like, yeah, it's fine. Whatever. I'll just go figure it out. Like, it's fine. What's the problem? Whereas in our era,
And he's a good example. He's a good example too. Of I tell people this is one of my favorite thought processes. I'm not suggesting it's a quote or anything, but like
mhm,
you don't need a school to be educated. You
no,
don't need a college or a university to consider yourself educated. Education is the is the is obtaining information and learning from that information and utilizing that information in a practical way. It has nothing to do with what school you go to, what school you graduate from, what none of that is relevant to the term educated.
right, right,
So,
exactly, yeah.
and he's a very, very good example of that.
So when you look at, okay, so Carver, um, and how you picked the people you picked, the structure of the book, how did you set it up? Talk us through that. What do we have to expect when we open up the book? What are we gonna see?
So the structure of the book is so obviously the table of contents just tells you how they're categorized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and that was the simplest version for me because I was thinking, should I put all the people in it? Should I take the table of contents and actually list out the people in the pages you can find them? And I was like, never mind, I'm not doing that. Like I just thought that would be too much work for me, not necessarily for the reader. I actually think it would have benefited the reader if I did it that way. But for me, it was just less work. Anyway, so the table of contents just categorizes them. Before each chapter, there's a brief description of the chapter itself and a couple of my thoughts about the people you're about to read about. So for example, if you're going to the section that is about entertainment, and this is chapter 4 in the entertainment business, there's basically a section that say, again, I'll just read the first paragraph. I'd like to preface this chapter by reminding you that the following quotes are from people in the entertainment industry and should be taken as such. Even my interpretations of the quotes might seem like a bit of a stretch, but these quotes have shown to be influential. So again, so from the entertainment business, we're talking about the people, the Walt Disneys of the world, the Audrey Hepburns of the world, Jonathan Winters, things like that. So all those people that we find as entertainers, I try to get people in the mindset of what you're about to read. It's like,
Mm,
don't forget, these are actors and actresses. These are people that, you shouldn't be living your life based on what they think of you. Okay. Like these are not people that have been in the trenches and, have the scrapes and bruises in their knees and elbows from army crawling in World War II, or,
mhm.
or people that have, lived on the streets for 3 months before they started their company and now they're a billionaire. That so they've been there, done that, they've lived through. Those are people that, like, when you take information from those types of people, that hits differently than somebody who's literally sitting on a on the silver screen and saying, "Work harder, go fry." Like, you're telling me, like, again, one of my favorite things, when an athlete, a professional athlete, and for those of you who have never done this, I'm gonna suggest you go look up Aaron Donald of the Washington of the, I'm sorry, of the LA Rams, and you can see a picture of him working out. By the way, that man that you're looking at is about 275 pounds. He's a giant ass human being that when you look at him on a football field, you think he's one of the big fat linemen, right? You think
Mhm.
he's one of the big fat linemen on the football field. You look at him when he works out. This guy is shredded at almost 300 pounds. And you're going to give me workout advice? Little old me that's 185 pounds and soaking wet, and the only thing ripped on me is my jeans. I look at that image and you say, you're just going to live more. You're just going to work hard. Go fry. Like, you make sure you understand where your advice is coming from. So
Mhm.
that's kind of the preface. So again, back to the structure of the book. So I put a page like that before every chapter, so that you can understand where my mindset is when I'm looking at these quotes from the incoming chapters. The second thing that you'll see in the book is I give you a little bit of, um, I wouldn't say history, but there's at least a little synopsis of who the person is if you've never heard of them before. The George Washington Carver one's a good example. If you've never heard of him, and you can look him up, even on his Wikipedia page is actually decent. I'm not suggesting it's his biography, but it's decent. But even from his Wikipedia page, you find out that he lived in 1864 to 1943. He was an American agricultural scientist and inventor. He promoted alternative crops to cotton and methods to prevent soil depletion, again, which are still being used today, by the way. So he was one of the most prominent black scientists of the early 20th century, while a professor at Tuskegee Institute. So I was right, it was Tuskegee. He developed techniques to improve all types of soils depleted by repeated planting of cotton. Under his leadership, the experiment station at Tuskegee published over 40 practical bulletins for farmers, many of them written by him directly, which included recipes. Many of them were advice specifically targeting poor farmers, including financial means, producing bigger crops, and preserving foods. The guy was amazing. So, like, I put little things like that in the book for you so you understand who the person was, why. And when you read the little excerpts about who they are, and then you read the quote makes a little more sense to know kind of where they're coming from. And then
Okay.
my hope is that if you understand them a little bit more, the quote a little bit more, then my kind of insights into the quote makes a little bit more sense to you. And that's
Okay.
essentially the entire book. That's essentially the structure of the book.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So easy read, like you said, it's about 286 pages, but easy read. You could dip in, dip out. You can select. You can sample from it, but you could also read it. You could also read it straight through. Okay. So we're turning the corner here. Want to wrap up. This has been a good conversation. I am excited and proud of Tom for writing a book, for getting out there and putting his thoughts around these quotes and his interpretations around these quotes for folks like yourself who are listening to the podcast and other readers as well. I was interested to see Um, other than Bruce Lee, a couple of other folks jumped out at me. Richard Branson was one of the folks that jumped out at me. Interestingly enough, I am 3 degrees. We talked about this just before we hit record. I'm 3 degrees separated from Richard Branson. I don't know the man, but I could tap him on the shoulder, I think. Maybe get a plane from him or something. I don't know. Might get some interesting Virgin Airlines chocolate. I don't know. But the other person that jumped out to me, and you had a couple of quotes in here, and I was actually joking with my daughter this weekend in a different kind of context about this guy, and I was sort of doing a halfway sort of English accent. Winston Churchill, and I'm fascinated because, and I want to know why you picked Churchill, and what your thoughts were behind Churchill. And the reason why I'm fascinated by Churchill is because he was a person who was undeniably a man of contradictions. He fought in World War I. He was an old school British imperialist and colonialist. He did not fundamentally believe that, he was unreconstructed around race and ethnicity and all of the ways that we would find to be obnoxious in today's society. Like if Churchill were walking around in today's society, he would be booted from polite society immediately. Him and G.K. Chesterton would be on an island somewhere, and they would have their phones taken away from them so they could never tweet or speak again. But he was also, with that being said, he was also a brilliant marketer for the British Empire. He was a brilliant philosopher of what success actually means. And to Churchill's credit, and I think this is probably because of the darker sides of him that he understood. By the way, he was also a painter, which people don't know about that. He was a prolific writer, which people don't know about that. But Churchill understood something about the motivating philosophy of man, and he understood it enough to rally England during the time of and the British Empire, but to rally England to not side with Hitler during World War II, but instead to fight against Hitler during World War II. And we could deconstruct all that like we're doing everything else in our current era, and finding all the problems with him and chucking him out on the trash bin of history. Just like the British chucked him out after they were done with World War II. But Churchill's quotes and the impact of Winston Churchill still ring down almost 90 years now distant from World War II. Why did you pick Churchill? Talk about the Churchillian quotes in the book. And then I want to ask you about leadership lessons that we should be getting from your book there. So talk a little bit about Churchill.
All right. So before I talk about him, let me just, I'm not gonna read the excerpts. I'm just gonna read the quotes. Right. So
Sure,
there are two
yeah.
quotes. So Churchill said, "The pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity. The optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty." The second quote, "Success is walking from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." Reading those two quotes, I'll throw it right back at, how could I not put him in this book? If you think about quotes that can help business people be more successful, that literally, I don't even have to read anything else. Why would you not put Churchill in this book? I mean, to your point, he had this charisma, this motivational charisma that was basically unheard of at the time, right? Like you couldn't, I mean, sure, we had Patton and soldiers would run through walls for Patton, but Patton wasn't moving a nation, right? Like
Oh, no.
soldiers appreciated Patton because they looked at him as somebody that Patton was the boss that would never ask you to do something that he wouldn't do himself, right?
Right.
If he's
Yep.
asking you to run into that firing range, that's because he's right there with you, or he's been there, done that. Churchill was more like the guy sitting back going, he was the cheerleader, the you can do it. I know you can do it. Have you done it? No, it's not about what I can do. It's about what I know you can do. Like, you know what I mean? So he was basically a motivational speaker before the motivational speaker thing even happened. So
Yeah.
so,
No, that's true.
so again, for this book, I ask you, how could you do a book like this without putting Churchill in it? I don't think a book like this could happen without having Churchill quotes in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, he was definitely he was definitely a colonialist. Like he believed in the imperial right to rule, right? And yet, which again creates tensions in our modern era, right? But to your point about quotes, I mean, there's one famous quote. This is what I was joking with my daughter about, where he's at some party with some woman. I can't remember what the context is. It was some diplomatic party, and people will correct me on this when they hear it. Um, and I think it was some diplomat's wife, and she said to him, you know, if you were my husband, I would poison you, or something to that effect. And Churchill, without missing a beat, says back to her, ma'am, if I were your husband, I would drink the poison, right? Or some variation of that.
Oh, didn't he say something like, "I would happily drink the poison" or something? I think
Yeah.
it
So,
was,
yeah. Like the man didn't miss. He
yeah.
did not miss. He never missed. And the reason why, or rarely missed, and the reason why I think was because he understood, to your point about cheering from the back, he understood, and both those quotes as well, he understood something about human nature at a very deep level, but then he also understood how to communicate that in its simplest, most direct manner, and its most impactful manner. And weirdly enough, at the appropriate time, right? His his speeches, his proclamations, and of course he took advantage of radio, which was a relatively new technology at the time that allowed him and allowed his voice, just like with Roosevelt, allowed him to rouse a nation out of their collective slumber.
I do want to read one part, right? So
Yeah,
in the quote, success is walking from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. I wrote, let's be transparent here. I don't know what the reference or what this quote is pertaining to, but I'm hoping he wasn't speaking about military failures. I couldn't even imagine having failure after failure, losing lives, and being enthusiastic about going into the next battle. But that was Winston Churchill for you.
yeah. Oh, there you go. Yeah,
So, I mean, again, there's actually a third quote in here from him saying, "Success is never final, failure is never fatal. It is courage that counts." So, like,
yeah,
to your point, though, I just think I think that he was such a I, he was a motivational speaker before it was a thing. I mean, let's
yeah,
just put it that way. I think that's why he's in this book, and I think leaders. I think leaders can look at his quotes, hopefully take them into context of the time frame that he's talking about, World War II, the most one of the most horrific time frames of our history, and he's just trying to keep the spirits up of people who are fighting for all of our freedoms. And I
right.
say all of ours because, in the words of was it Jeff Daniels in the newsroom that said, you know, America is not the freest country on the planet. There's 207 sovereign countries, 180 of which are free countries. They have elections. Like, so I think all that started with World War II. Think about it. World War II
They did.
really was the catapult that made all of the other countries in the world think, why can't we have the same, why can't we have liberties as citizens? And I think Churchill was instrumental in making everybody feel like every citizen mattered. So
Yep, yep.
anyway.
Rounding a corner here as we close. We got to wrap up here today. Want to thank Tom for coming on the podcast as usual and talking about his book, the interpretation of quotes for business success. So, from the book, what can leaders take and apply for business success? Let's close with that.
I think it goes back to something you said earlier, where you were walking down the hallway and you were seeing quotes from all these people, but the security guard had no idea not only how to how to use them or what to think of them, or he forgot they were even there. He walked by them so often that they weren't
Mhm.
even there. So I think for leaders, I think number one, I hope they can take a nugget or two out of it and help them succeed. I hope that some of the things that I say in here will resonate with them, that they can actually, you know, they can actually take some of these thoughts and just be better business people, hopefully. The second part is I hope it gives them some forethought, or sorry, I hope it gives them more like hesitation of just throwing one of those quotes up on a wall. Make sure the quote means something to you. Make sure that people around you know what it means to you. Find people that are going to work with you because of the quote. Like if the quote is up on the wall, don't just put random quotes on your wall. Let's start with that. Don't just throw random quotes up in a frame and just have it there just because. Like that is weird to me. I'm sure it's weird to you.
Oh yeah.
I mean, when you described walking down that
Oh yeah.
hallway, I was starting to have palpitations going, what the hell? Why would somebody ever do that? But whatever. But, but if you're going to walk into an office, or you're going to have my favorite too, Hasan, with, I'm sure you've seen them with these virtual backgrounds.
Oh yeah.
People will put them in the virtual backgrounds and you go, oh, what's that quote? And they're like, oh, it's something I found on Pinterest. Like, are you kidding? Like, what is, so you're just throwing it back there because you like the border? Or oh, Audrey Hepburn was my favorite actress, so I just put it up there because I love her. Well, what does it say? Can you tell me what it says without looking back there? It's, for those of you who are watching the video on this, Hasan is killing himself. But anyway, I know I'm going off on this tangent because here's the thing. Here's the most important thing that you can take away from this podcast episode.
Yes.
Words matter. The words matter. The words that you use to explain yourself, to express yourself, so that people understand who you are, who your business is, what your business does, matters. Make them matter, and make them matter to not just you, but the people that are reading them. And if they ask you questions about it, have answers. Have the answers as to why this quote matters to you. Because you know what? I just did a book of 140 of these, 140 something of these quotes, and every single one of them mattered to me, which is why I wrote the excerpts, right? Like why I wrote the things, because it's not as simple as, oh, that's a cool quote. I like that quote. Bruce Lee was my favorite human being of all time. I'm just going to use one of his quotes. It shouldn't be about that. It should be something that resonates with you, that you can resonate with other people over, that you can geek out over. Hasan and I could talk about just about any topic you want us to talk about. I'm guaranteeing you, we will find some way, shape, or form to move that conversation into movies. But anyway, but that's because we've understood movies have mattered to us as a culture, as a history, as a progression. We've watched, not only that, we've seen things in movies start as science fiction and end up as a reality. Like
Right.
some scientist watched a movie as a kid and went, I think I can build that. And they do it. So
Yep.
like movies are impactful to people. Words matter. The words that you use matter. And I think the reason this is even the most impactful, again, I go back to that very first quote, and why I didn't put it in this book is beyond me. I have no idea why I didn't do that. I think it was selfish. I think it was selfishness. I think I just wanted that quote to be mine, and I didn't want to tell everybody else what I thought about. But and I didn't want to put it in print so that I could never take it back.
Because it could never take it back. Yeah.
Right? Or I could never say you took that out of context. Anyway, but I think because these words matter, and how you choose your words matter in every situation you can think of. Your interaction with your children, your interaction with your spouse, your interaction with your boss, your interaction with the IRS when they audit you. Your words matter, and how you use them matters. So what I hope leaders get out of this book is, don't just take a random quote, put it on the wall, and hope people get it. Make sure there's some meaning and some purpose behind what you're actually asking people to think about and do and use. And if they have a different interpretation than you do, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. You can still leverage the successes of both of those interpretations to your advantage.
Words matter. And the words of Tom Libby will be the words that the final thoughts that we have on this podcast episode today. We will have the links to where you can pick up the interpretation of quotes for business success. It is available on Kindle. You can also get a physical paperback version from Amazon. Tom will have those links in the show notes below the player for this podcast episode. So I encourage you to go out and pick up that copy. Go ahead, Tom.
If I could add one
Yeah,
last
go ahead.
thing. I would absolutely love to hear what you guys think. I'd love to hear if you read some of my words on it, your thoughts on even my words. If you guys, I would love to hear what people think about it. So if you do have the forethought to look at it, to read it, to pick up the Kindle, I would absolutely welcome your version of the interpretation.
And post those reviews on Amazon.com. Just search for Tom Libby or Thomas Libby. I don't know which
No,
one.
it's Tom.
It's
Tom
Tom.
Libby.
Okay, cool. Tom Libby. So we're putting it underneath there. So go ahead and search for that. Look for the interpretation of quotes for business success and leave a review on Amazon. Once again, I'd like to thank Tom Libby for coming on our show today. And with that, well, we're out.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.